Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dylan Box. I'm your co-host, Ryan Harsch.
And I'm Chris LeRoy.
And thanks for joining us for another installment
of the Dylan Box.
It's been a little while.
Yeah.
How have you been?
I've been good. We've been working this show, and people really seem to have enjoyed the Dylan Boxes, so we were ready to move on to another piece.
Mm-hmm.
So should we look in the Dylan Box?
I think we're past due. Yeah, reach in there.
Reach in there for the Dylan Box.
Watch your hand.
Yeah, never know.
Yeah.
Well, usually I pull
There's something in there. Oh,
very small.
that's okay. Remember these?
Yeah. This old thing called a
Compact
CD.
disc.
Compact disc.
Right. Well, it looks like we have Oh Mercy this week.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, like my thing with Bob was when I first started listening to him,
Yeah.
I really didn't go past Desire for the longest time. I knew all this stuff, and I discovered him early 90s
Okay.
for me. And so I don't know why, but I didn't really mess with that other stuff. I was almost like a purist, I guess you could say. I didn't like that old stuff.
Yeah.
I had heard snatches of it. And I was like, well, his voice has changed. I don't know if I dig it too much now. But as that kind of kept me away from so much. And then as I've gotten older, I'm thinking, I'm listening to this stuff like this, and I'm really starting to like it.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with this one. This kind of like I had heard a little bit of it before this episode, getting into it, and then really immersing myself in it for the last week, and I'm really like what I hear.
I'm interested about the difference in the voice, because that you reference that as one of the key things that is different.
Right.
And certainly there's a big change between the 60s Dylan that you really kind of grabbed into first or linked into first, and then the Dylan voices that ensued. But it's certainly not, if the first Dylan you heard is the most recent album, you would say, okay, that's
true.
This is a tough voice to live with, or maybe it's the best voice to live with.
Right.
But what was it about the voice? Did that, when you started listening to Oh Mercy, did it seem like a different voice?
It did, but I mean, when I heard this stuff from this era, it was that the voice kind of put me off.
Okay.
It was different. It was, because Dylan is a singer, you're not getting talked about a lot, for singing in the 60s and the 70s on the stuff he did.
Right.
In terms of him being like some brilliant singer. But I think later on, it was just different. It kind of shocked me a little bit. It was different to me, and I wasn't completely into it at the time. But listening to it now, it has this, on this recording especially, it has like this warmth to it. That I hear, and it's the way it's recorded, to me, this album has a lot of atmosphere to it in the way that like a Blonde on Blonde does for Nashville. This one has that for like Louisiana and the South.
Okay.
To me, and it's because of doing a little digging on the history of it. It's because this was recorded in New Orleans. And who's the producer?
Daniel Lanois.
Right. So basically, Dylan was hanging out with Bono, right? And then Bono recommended Daniel Lanois, and then they crossed paths and they came together. And that's how we have this.
And when he went to record, usually he puts together kind of a hodgepodge of different musicians he wants to play with.
Right.
And I think when he got there, already had his band.
Yes.
And already had those angles worked out for good and for bad.
Sure.
Because the atmosphere for me is one of the things that is at the time when the album came out, it was a very welcome return to form.
Sure.
People really, it was pretty celebrated.
Resurgence.
Yeah. Say, oh, Dylan's, Dylan's back, kind of thing. And I remember, I think this is the first album I bought first as a CD.
Oh, okay. Was it in the big long box?
No.
Remember those?
No, no.
The big waste of paper.
You had to fold things.
Yeah.
No.
You could make origami out of it when
You could.
you were done.
You could. But no, I think it was
Listening.
a straight up CD, and it was just, well, here's the fastest way to get it. And I understood right away. People are going to like this. There's some strengths to this here that folks are kind of waiting for Dylan to get back in the groove.
Right. And ironically, 10 years later, they say the same thing about Time Out of Mind, which we could do another time, but same producer.
Same producer.
And it was like, hey, he's back. Well, he's been around for a while.
Right.
Nice try, though. But
well, and there he'll have numerous reappearances for Mr. Dylan. But I remember my personal response. I liked the album. I remember talking. My other big Dylan head would have been John Hickman, and we were talking about that album and what what we liked about it. I always knew he loved Man with the Long Black Coat, and I think a lot of it was about some of the atmosphere that was created in that studio and an ambiance to this album that was very appealing to a lot of folks, and just to sort of lure them back into these songs. And what's interesting, when I was listening to it a lot over the last couple of weeks, when we kind of decided we want to work on this, is two things. I was of two minds.
Sure.
One was, I remember that kind of warmth that you're talking about, that atmosphere. And he created a kind of a very easy sounding music. It's very accessible, and it kind of weaves like a little tapestry of sound. The second part I started listening to is how that sound and the atmosphere kind of bugged me after a while. And because eventually Dylan, who did have that resurgence again with Time Out of Mind and went back to Daniel Lanois, stopped using Daniel Lanois and started kind of saying, I'm trying to remember exactly how I would quote it, but it's just like, he's too worried about the sound.
Right.
And I went back, listened to this album and experienced both things. And so, I really like the sound of this album, and I could see how it starts a little bit to get in the way of the material.
Sure.
If you listen to, Man with a Long Black Coat.
Yeah.
Very atmospheric to the bone, right?
Yeah.
It's just got these sounds and slides.
It takes a minute to get started, but you're fine with that.
It uncorks itself and it floats through. And when the album first came out, I was wondering, why does Dylan sing that song in such angular ways? The long black coat.
It's a cadence.
It's a cadence. He does that. And it's unusual. It was an unusual kind of sharp angled cadence. Well, I think in this album, he had already started to rebel against the production and the heightened production of the 80s.
Because they got into it. Like, it took him a while to warm up to what he was doing.
Yeah. Well, I think that rebellion, you kind of hear that tension in the music.
Right.
I think in Man with a Long Black Coat, Dylan is trying to cut through this sonic wash that can be, and with a great song, it enhances it. But you could take that same sound and apply it to the stupidest song and still have the atmosphere.
Of course.
With a much lesser material. And I think, as I started shifting between, what a great comeback and return for Bob Dylan. Any of those I'm always happy about. And what was it what was the center of this tension that he had? I think it was the beginning of when he started to think he should be his own producer.
Sure.
So he's watching, he's saying, here's these techniques. I've been in studios for years. Maybe I'm the better judge, being Bob Dylan, maybe I'm the better judge of how these things should sound and where it can be limited. Because there's a couple songs that sound natural in here. I mean,
they're just kind of spare.
Yes, they're spare, and they're even the rocker is very accessible. Everything's broken.
Right.
But most people who heard this album, my friend David Ringwald, who hit
Yeah.
me in the nose with a truck.
Oh my.
Uh,
Like right in the nose.
right
like,
across here. You see this?
Oh.
That man did that. He was 4 years old. He started beating on me. But
That's another episode.
yeah, it's the whole episode of itself. But David
bonus.
Ringwald wrote to me. He goes, "I really like Everything Is Broken." And people really, that song's got this easy flow, and he's got this
that rockabilly
thing, and they capture that. Band captures that. But and so that's sort of the easy version. But you can see some of these other ones where it almost seems a little overproduced.
Yeah. Well, looking into the history of this, and did you remember the chapter in Chronicles that he wrote basically like a whole chapter about recording this?
Okay.
So, and he says, Dylan, I guess it took him about 3 months to 4 months to get this done with like many sessions.
Yeah.
He would talk about going into the studio and just, it's constantly in the chapter. It's like, it's not working. Then stuff would work, and then they tried a different way, and then he'd get on a motorcycle and he'd go take off for a day, and then clear his head. But what Lenoir had him do was they sat down like we're doing kind of here,
right,
facing each other, and Dylan didn't like that because what Dan wanted him to do was focus on his voice, and then add all that other stuff later on, which is that's kind of the sound you're getting is like. If you strip it all away, and this might be a future like bootleg series where you have, like you do with all this stuff, like outtakes or whatever.
Where you find that the song sometimes sat somewhere else.
Sure.
And I think that's very specific. Again, going back to that song to where I get the feeling in some of these songs of Dylan not holding a guitar,
right,
but standing in a booth and singing and emoting and acting out the song, which... For him, it's a powerful tool,
sure,
but it might not be the thing that he was comfortable with, and you kind of sense that a little bit in that.
Well, you wonder what happened too, because fun trivia, he had recorded a whole other version of this album with Ron Wood before this. Yes, this is another thing I learned about. Yes,
wow.
He recorded a whole version of this album with Ron Wood and then scrapped it for some reason because he'd done stuff with Ron Wood before.
Yeah.
He gave him, I think, 7 days.
7 days.
Gave him that song, and so that I'm like hoping too that might come up one day because, you wonder what happened there too.
Well, and it would seem like Ron Wood would have been somewhat more attuned to where maybe this was headed.
Yeah.
But I think of a song like "What Good Am I," which is I think on my favorite track. Where it sounds like the song overtakes the production.
Yeah.
It's like it
transcends it.
That song could be on his album this year.
That's why I kind of like this too, because it's like I really like the new album. Really like the new album. And then hearing this is like a nice kind of companion to that.
It is.
And this sounds like it could have been made at the same time. It's crazy. It's transcending, and it's 88, 89, I believe.
Something like that.
So,
And so maybe he was just struggling with the form and the format that he has this kind of more natural sound. That's always a part of what he does.
Yeah.
And that song is so personal, and it's sung not angular. It's not a cadence.
Right.
But it's this very, very heartfelt space that he really lives in now. If you're listening to his new album, he just kind of breathes that music now.
It's like a beat poet.
And it's just there, and the way the music supports it. Some reviewers would say, I wish he'd let people solo sometimes on this stuff. But he's created a sound that supports where he is in the here and now. And I think this album is kind of a transition.
Yes.
To where he's experimenting with what can modern recording do me. But where is it taxing? And there's just a few spots in there where it just seems like he's overseen. And how can that ever be true of Dylan? Because he's always, so much his phrasing is so much a part of the delivery of the song.
Sure.
But it almost sounds like he's kind of getting back. Lenoir's doing this, but I'm going to sing it like this.
He does focus on the singing. I mean, back to what I said earlier, meaning what I said about 60s and 70s, I wasn't thought of as a great singer. I mean, he wasn't, but to me, he is. I mean, it's the way he changed it, but it's not what people talk about when they critique his stuff.
Right.
But it's like, the way he phrases things on this, it might have come from a decade of just kind of, messing around with other things. The new album is a little similar in that he's done like traditional songs, an album of traditional songs. What was it? A Christmas album, and then a Sinatra album,
Sure.
And all of that is like prelude to what he does on the new album.
Right.
So it's like practice for
And I think you're right. I think he sort of
hear that Sinatra stuff.
He ramped up to how am I going to sing my songs?
Right.
And you would think after the 100 years of Bob Dylan's been Bob Dylan that he would know that. But I think as an artist that he's changed and he's taken risks and he's been willing to be different incarnations of himself. The Blue Period.
Right.
And when he's done that, he's had to kind of attune, well, how am I going to sing this? But it really is. His new album really does sound like a singer's album.
Yes.
Whereas this was the beginning of what maybe it would mean to be a singer's album with support. Who's the support that's with you?
Because with the new, and we don't want to talk too much about the new album because we want to.
Well, eventually.
Hey, you know what? With the new album, it's like that music can drop away. It sounds like it could just drop away at any minute. And with this, it's like it needs it to exist.
To exist.
But so I think it's the big difference there. It's like, but with the new album, it's like because a lot of it's the same, and it's almost like a lot of it's like very dirge-like, in some ways.
Yeah, it's an accompaniment.
Right. But it's great. I mean, you hear it on headphones, it's like, whoa, it's like, that's important too. But the way he makes it exist with what he's doing is fantastic.
So maybe he learns a little bit, or learns a lot, and looked at some of these techniques from Lanois, but resents a little bit that the technique is taking over. And I think it's an album of balances. And for a lot of people, they really, really love this album. It's not in my top pantheon.
Yeah.
For the struggle, that there was this production versus the song, and sometimes Dylan wins.
Well,
and the song sneaks in, and that's where What Good Am I is just such a heartfelt, light thing that I'm sure there's other versions of it where there was much more to it.
Sure.
But I think he probably insisted on, it sounds like he's leading the song.
Right.
And in some of the songs, sounds like the production is leading the song. And, I mean, you have an album and you try all things and you agree on what works and then you put them out.
Sure. And that's obviously what he did here. I mean, it sounds like, again, from reading the book, like they were trying a lot of things. But, they were like, he uses the space that they're in one part, like you can hear like the air, and I think they always, something I read too is they always recorded at night. So he made sure they always recorded at night. So they kind of capture that, so you can hear it, like you can hear the whole sound is like coming from this is New Orleans. This is what you're getting.
Yeah. So it has a kind of a stamp of a place and an environment. Mm-hmm. It certainly is the modern Dylan.
Yes,
sounds like you say. So maybe that's the piece of the 60s Dylan, and you're saying, I'm not too sure about the voice and the environment I'm going to enter into to
enjoy
a
personal thing. I don't know as well.
Well, but I think it's true. Is that for someone who's been an artist for so long, there is going to break into periods, especially someone who's as high quality.
Right.
And so people will long for another era. But to me, this is like true, like the modern Dylan. In voice, you see the first hints of that kind of sore throat that would end up happening forever.
Yeah.
A little of it starting to creep in. You hear the instrumentation, the singer, songwriter, and there's also another element that even a songwriting technique that seems to come in at this album strongly. Earlier Dylan songs to me come across like stories.
Yeah.
And you might have a phrase like shelter from the storm, but you always just land back on that. You land back in that space after kind of venturing out in that part of the story and that part of the relationship. And then shelter from the storm means something different.
Yes.
At each juncture of the story, at each chapter of the story. What happens in this album, and I think continues a new style for him, is kind of a splinter song.
Sure.
To where he will take the phrase, and then that phrase kind of jumps out, and then there'll be a lot of flashing, jumping images that revolve around the phrase, but don't necessarily grow it.
Yeah.
He just a political world. We live in a political world, and you have these different things, but they don't necessarily coalesce. They kind of, okay, I understand it.
He's straight too far from where it's tethered.
Well, it's just or it's tethered so close, or just the notion of a political world doesn't really mean enough for you to gather a lot out of it. So it's like a song that's almost works because he's trying this scattershot, splintered idea where the center is just a phrase.
Yeah.
Disease of conceit. There's some different things, and there's a series of songs that he does from there to where he uses that center line, and rather than building a story around it, he takes flashes of things and what that could mean. It's neither good nor bad, but it's a different style, and it happens a lot in this album.
And you can tell because all the songs are pretty concise. I mean, I don't think anything goes over 5 minutes, right? I mean, I think it's pretty short. So, and the whole thing is like 38 minutes or something. So it's a lot more like digestible if you're just getting someone into this for the first time.
Yeah.
But, getting back into it, I was like, where's the big 10-minute song? Where's the Desolation Row?
Where's Murder Most Foul?
Right. You're not going to get that here.
No.
But they're digestible. They're pretty concise. I was surprised too, because I thought by this time he was kind of over it, but there's that religious imagery is still coming up a lot in the album.
Yeah.
Not completely surprised, but by this time you thought he had moved on to something different, but it's still all over this. Even Disease of Conceit is about Swaggart.
Yep.
And it's almost a pro Swaggart. It's kind of which is like the what you thought he wouldn't do.
Yeah.
That's the point of view no one was taking at the time.
Sure. And I go back, I'm harping on What Good Am I? It is a highly moral song.
Yes.
It is saying, and he turns it on himself, which is,
it's
very religious theme to where you're asking, where do I fit in this story? And I see this unfairness. I see this, if I see this trouble, am I willing to do something about it? I think it's one of his most beautiful lyrics, most straightforward, and I don't think it's even possible to get there without going through his three Christian albums. This is a mature version of that music, to where he's not even talking about God as much as he's talking about the self and your responsibility in this world, but it has religious overtones.
Yes,
with it. And
he's taking the lessons he's learned and he's applying them, and he's not preaching at you.
Right? No, and he's
this is what I've learned from all this.
All right,
listen up, because I've been around a while, and this is what
or I'm preaching to myself.
Yeah,
and so I really you see in this album this kind of a shattered piece to it, a shattered feel, and that some things are coming together, and there's Dylan and his possibilities of what he's going to be in this modern Dylan. His songwriting changes a bit, and he says, I'm going to write these things that are more modern. I think he perceived that as a more modern kind of writing, and I don't know if this is conscious, but it just happened with these set of songs. And then at the end, Shooting Star, when I first listened to the album the very first time, I remember just absolutely loving that song.
It's great.
I love that.
It's a great way to end the album, too.
Yeah, it was the feeling of that thing. It's the love song. He captures kind of all the beautiful poetry of earlier versions of Dylan, but he starts to kind of pull it back into this kind of soulful music that sticks with him.
Yeah.
He, from this album, you could see it as a precursor. If you wanted someone, if you were trying to beg someone to like Dylan, and you couldn't trust, couldn't trust that they would love like a Rolling Stone, and why shouldn't people love that song? But so who knows? Because that's like
for everybody.
Caveman talking. This is a long time ago. What's Mike? Show me something modern. Well, who do you like? Well, I like you too.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you know, that producer did a Bob Dylan album, and there's some music in here that could be some YouTube
Similar,
things.
yeah.
You could
Definitely hear it.
You could.
Because I think he came off a Joshua Tree, and this was the next thing he did.
Okay. So if you were trying to convince someone to like Dylan, you go, what?
That's your argument.
Try with this as U2's producer, and there's lyrics that even Bono would sing.
Yeah.
Oversing, but he would sing it.
Yeah. That's a drama.
Yeah, there's lots of drama, but he provides the drama here too, and it would be a great gateway drug.
Yes.
For someone to say, oh, his voice. I thought he just sang like a Billy Goat. I go, no, that's now. He's full grown Billy Goat.
Different.
He was just a little baby Billy Goat early, and he grew up to a bigger, scraggly one over time.
Yeah. He matured.
He matured.
Yeah, right? He got his horns.
He got his horns, and he's all good. But that's why the third part of
it's a good selling point.
I think it is.
Yeah.
A lot of people who've written to me about the Lo-Fi Lounge have really enjoyed the Dylan piece, and I'm always trying to the Dylan box, and we've really only covered like kind of two spaces so far, but they were kind of controversial and kind of oddball choices.
The last ones you'd expect anyone to pick.
Exactly. This is not an oddball choice. This is really, if you wanted someone to think a little bit about
pretty
Dylan,
standard.
Be standard. So there's a way to look into this stuff, and it's an entryway to see the modern Dylan. But if you got into it, and then if you liked some of the more emotional tunes in there, you'd be prepared for a Dylan to come.
So if you like this, you would just jump right to the new stuff, or would you give them like Time Out of Mind, or
Time Out of Mind, or Love and Theft.
There you go. That's a good one too. Yeah.
Love and Theft will give you a little more
one.
pop polish on that. That is the first album that Dylan produced by himself.
Love and Theft.
Which,
by the way, is anniversary tomorrow, I believe, because remember it came out on 9/11.
9/11.
And so that would be 19 years ago, or
on that day.
Yes.
On that day.
Yes.
I'm an educator. It had already started, but we were in California, and so we were back in our office, and we were seeing the rest of the drama unfolding, and it was a weird spot for every American, because did things just stop? I think it did. It's a little bit. I was in the third grade when Kennedy was shot, and the world stopped.
Yeah.
The United States just stopped. On that day, the United States just stopped. And people were trying to figure out what's going on and who we are and what's going to happen. And I remember towards the end of the day, I went over to a building, a government office building, and I was in a meeting, or going into a meeting, and I went into the back room, and the guy I was going to meet wasn't there.
Yeah.
And then it got really quiet. And I realized that everyone had left the building, that they just hadn't told me, because I kind of got
all by yourself.
I was in the back. And so when I went out, the whole place was empty, and I came around, and there were police who was just starting to come and search the building. I go, no, I'm just an educator.
Sir, yeah.
I'm just an educator.
Just here for a meeting.
Yeah. After that, I went to the office, and by the afternoon, I was like, this is just...
it's surreal.
This is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So on the way home, I stopped by Best Buy.
Okay.
And I bought Love and Theft.
Oh, wow.
It just come out. And we'll use this piece for the for that segment when we do that album, because when I put that music on, it seemed like it was a soundtrack for that day. And people have talked about that later.
Yeah.
But I thought about it that day when I was listening to that music, because I had to do something. There's some pieces in language, and there's just some spaces in that, in story and song, that seem to ramp right up to that day.
Yeah, and a similar one, a different band, Wilco, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. That's another one that came out pretty much around that same time. Same thing. It has some of those images and some of those songs. It's very like Love and Theft, very eerie. How it's like, it's just interesting how it's almost presupposed. Stuff, it's just how
some of it's happenstance, but
it plays along with history, with a lot of music.
It's the language of our times, and we can get these cross currents, But I think the verdict. We're never here to make a verdict, but the verdict on sound for me is I was of two minds. I said I remember what I like about the warmth, the environment.
Yes.
I like those things, and then there was this little critic's piece in my head about
that voice,
that voice, and
fan
this
for so
change,
long.
and there's this balance. Maybe it's overproduced and everything, but it's all said and done. When I listened to it about a half an hour before I came here, I go, no, I really like this album.
Yeah.
It's a nice place to
LeRoy
be.
is all over it too, like that dobro, and then he's playing the lap slide. And he's an amazing musician, and he's doing some great stuff on here. So he's really, I think, more than any producer before. It seems like a lot of his producers didn't really have a hand in producing. This doesn't seem like they,
As much as Stamp.
Sure, yeah. I mean, he had Wexler for Slow Train Coming, right? But that was more of just that was the gold standard kind of for that. Mm-hmm. But it seems like with this one, Dylan kind of met his match, and with this like Maverick kind of different producer. Mm-hmm. And so, but then going back to your original point, is he's saying like, yeah, like this is the pinnacle, and now I can do this on my own. I've been an apprentice for so long in this producing game. And then maybe I could do this on my own.
Maybe why not me? And I think maybe that idea came to him there because the other undercurrent thing when I was probably being a little too critical of it, I was saying, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if you take these songs and you transport them back in time, and it's John Wesley Harding, and he has a bass player and a drummer, and he plays these songs. What would they be like? Would they be better? Would they be underperformed? Would they be? Well, the truth is, with every Dylan album, you get who he is, or what the friction was, or what the story was then.
Right.
He never looks back. When he goes and plays live,
he's done with it.
He's done with it, and he moves on. So
if he plays the song again, it's not going to sound the way it does in the album.
No, it's a waltz now.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a
Sorry,
waltz.
yeah.
Everything's a
I'm
waltz.
not going to tell you what it is until we're starting it.
Exactly. It's up to you to decide.
Right.
But it is. I think it was. The beauty of him as an artist is, kind of what you see is what you get for that album, and I think that friction is all over this.
Yeah,
and he maybe is kind of meeting his match, or certainly someone who's willing to challenge him, and so therein lies the beauty. Here's an album,
conflict out of art, or art. Sorry, art out of conflict.
Well, boy,
yeah, or either way, right?
Either way, because it creates something that's meaningful, and it's still. It's still powerful.
Right.
It's just in a different way. And as much as I love, and you'll people who will wrestle you to the ground that John Wesley Harding is the best thing he ever recorded. And there's some parts of me that John almost believes that.
I love it. Yeah.
But they can't be true if you're willing to follow this artist along and appreciate who they were at that juncture. Oh Mercy's a good. It's a good album.
It is, and didn't it kind of start like the live sound differently for him? Like around the time it came out, didn't it start like changing his live stuff? Because I read some about that. Like he was just doing like hour shows and just come out and that was it. And then after this, he just kind of started seeing possibilities.
Oh, started building.
Right, like in his other songs, or just like changing everything. Like let's change the arrangements. Almost like producer on the fly, like just in a live setting though, so it's like, how many people can you say that about? Right. I mean, how many people can you say, I take all these songs up on stage and I know it's going to piss you off, but I'm going to change it. And that's the biggest complaint I've heard people say. And I've never seen the man live, but the people I know said, well, I didn't recognize the song until about 3 minutes in, and it's like you don't know the words that well, because
it is true.
Yeah,
and when I have seen him, you'll get, depending what you see, like there'll be heat.
Did you get people walking out? I paid $150 for this ticket.
The only time I see people not walking but running.
Oh wow!
Away from Bob Dylan was out. Was it Blockbuster?
Oh yeah,
It was an odd matchup. It was him and like Santana.
That's Blockbuster Pavilion.
Yeah, there you go.
That's always the juxtaposition.
Let's try to find two things that may not work together.
Don't work at all. Yeah.
But everyone was here to sing along with Oye Como Va. And so when Dylan came on, one of the phenomena of him live is, even back then, it took him a while to get into it. It may be
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 songs before he hit
Because he's feeling it.
his voice or just the groove of it. And he always has a great band. But when he started in this first song, don't know which one it was. I mean, and it probably wasn't a thing you would want to have as a first song. You're
Sure.
probably doing Visions of Joanna.
Something
Who
random.
knows?
Yeah.
It was, but whatever
Start
it
with
was,
Sad-Eyed Lady, the Lowlands.
he just started to sing. And I've never seen that many people just like, not like, picking up their stuff. I mean, just literally just running. Just like,
bathroom break.
just
Yeah.
heading up the hills. And said that I don't want anything to do with this. After the 5th song was one of my favorite shows ever. He was just incredible. But you could yell over the hill.
Yeah.
You should have waited 5 songs.
Sorry. Do you think it takes him a minute to get into it because he's like picking up the vibe of the audience? You
The
think?
vibe. I think it's just catching his voice.
Yeah.
Too. He kind of builds up to his voice at that time. Who knows? I think it just takes a
He
while.
just likes to piss people off.
Maybe.
I mean, because I think it's great. Because I think a lot of the best music I like is like built kind of on confrontation. And just like that. I think that's that's kind of like the same thing with this, is where you have conflict and art kind of working together. But I know when he did like Desert Trip, he turned the screens off.
Oh.
And no one liked that. So, but it's like, this is what I want to do. And this is, if you don't like it, too bad.
He doesn't like the screens.
Yeah.
No, he won't.
Which is great. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, he's a singular performer, but they did run.
Yeah.
Boy, did they run.
Yeah.
I just think it was like
That's
a
hilarious.
stampede. Yeah. The door, but it was still great. It got to be great.
Yeah.
And so, respecting albums as a thing in a moment in time, and whatever it took to put that thing together, whatever they signed off on and gave you,
It's the finished product.
is the finished product. That's the thing that we're going to live. I mean, we're in an age where we do get this chance to have all these box sets and these wonderful outtakes, because you will find, I'm sure when the box set that covers this era, you're going to find some things. What was that man thinking? Why didn't he leave this, and this,
The
and this?
Ron Wood album.
Yeah. Where's the Ron Wood album?
I was
We
like,
should get a
okay.
T-shirt for that. They can't all be California Bears.
Right.
We're going to get a T-shirt that says, "Where's Ron Wood?"
Yeah. What happened to that?
What happened to that record? That's very intriguing. But respecting the album for what it is, and it doesn't mean you have to love every piece of music that Dylan does, but he invites you in to struggle, to struggle with what his songs are. There's these albums go to different places,
Right.
and there are different environments, and it's his first Bob Dylan album called Bob Dylan, when he's doing mainly folk things. He just didn't stay there, and he sort of reserved the right to be an artist. But I think it's always just an invitation for people to say, check it out.
Right. And it's always respecting the intelligence of the listener, because it's never pandering. Never pandering from day one.
Yeah.
And it's always if you don't like it now, you might like it 5 years from now. You might never like it.
Yeah.
Come check it out.
Yeah.
And tell me what you think.
That's
So
right.
very glad we did this one. This
Yeah.
is a good experience.
It really is.
And it's nice for our viewers to turn them on to other sides of Dylan, or other albums of Dylan that ordinarily kind of new for me too, in a way, and then new for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
New for all of you.
It's fun, and it will be interesting to see what we will do next when we reach into the Dylan box.
Watch your hand.
Well,
Yeah, there might be something else
a
in there.
bear
Yeah.
hand comes out and gets me. There's too many. We should. All we need is the bear to enter this.
Something pops up out of it. Yeah. Maybe for a Halloween episode. Or
Well, we're getting close to October, so
yes, we are.
we'll need to think about what Dylan music would lend itself to Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to go to Theme Time Radio Hour,
Yeah.
kind of check what he was thinking.
Yeah. Because there's stuff throughout. There's so much other music you can think about that lent itself to that. You know? I mean, you probably would think that he was into someone like Screaming Jay Hawkins,
Oh, yeah.
for example, who would start his shows coming out of a coffin, I believe.
Yeah,
That was
it works.
pretty cool.
It's nice work if you can get it.
Right? So
I think we're good.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us once again. And we don't know what we're going to do next time, but it'll probably be a surprise to us as much as it is to all of you. Ryan Harsch, thanks for joining us.
Chris LeRoy, thanks for joining us.